The time is 17 minutes to 8.
Is enough being done to study people who have transgender treatment, including sometimes surgery, and then decide that they've changed their minds? An extraordinary article in The Times at the weekend by the columnist Janice Turner suggested that a researcher at a British university had been prevented from carrying out such research because it was politically incorrect. The university is Bath Spa, and the researcher, James Caspian, and we'll hear from him in a moment. But first, what is it that transgender people might object to in this kind of work? The US transgender activist, Ricky Wilkins.
There is a very small fraction of people who do decide to detransition. I'm not trying to say that it's not a fraught experience for them or that it shouldn't be studied. But it is not the first place that I would put my money if I wanted to study the problem afflicting transgender people. And I think there is certainly a strong political undercurrent to those studies. People have been launching studies that undercut transgender people's access to surgery for decades now. So when I see one more study that aims to show that, transgender people really don't need this or want this, or they're just deluded, or they're suffering from some other kind of psychopathology, I look at it a little warily and think, well, there's probably something there that could be studied and should be studied, but it's not where I want to put my money if someone gives me $1 million to spend on transgender people and their problems. The problem is not the study itself, it's the uses to which such studies are put. When you study people who detransition, the right almost inevitably picks these studies up and goes, see, they didn't really need it after all, or they didn't really want it, or they really shouldn't give it to them.
That was Ricky Wilkins. Let's talk to James Caspian, who is a psychotherapist. He's specialised in working with transgender and transsexual people for the past 10 years. He's on the line now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Do you take the point made there by Ricky Wilkins that actually there is an issue here that even if the research is done in good faith, it can be used in a bad way?
I absolutely sympathise with everything he said. As you know, I've worked for many years with people who've transitioned their gender. And I think that when people feel marginalised and vulnerable to criticism, they're very sensitive to anything they may perceive as that and feel afraid. He's right. Older studies do show that there were, at one point, 3 to 5% of people regretted, or more recent studies showed 20% of people regretted. I think these studies are out of date, and I think because the whole field has completely changed over the last few years, that the idea that we might use the information from the research that I was going to do in a way that wouldn't help people is completely wrong. Right. I think the research is necessary to really help people.
OK, so initially you went to Bath Spa University and they agreed that you should do this research, is that right?
They did. I proposed to research people who reversed their gender reassignment surgery, having had a conversation in 2014 with Dr. Georgievich of Belgrade, who does many gender reassignment surgeries. He said that year he had done 7 reversal surgeries and never in his experience had anything like that happen before of that number of people, and so it needed to be researched because it had never been researched, and we need to know about those people's experiences.
So the university, having initially said you could do it, what then happened?
What happened was that I found it very difficult to get people willing to talk openly about the experience of reversing surgery. They said they felt too traumatized to talk about it, which made me think we really need to do the research even more. And so I was contacted by a group of young women in the United States who explained that they had reversed their gender transitions without reversing their surgeries. Their surgery was double mastectomy, removal of the breasts. In my preliminary research, I discovered that there seemed to be growing numbers of particularly young people and particularly young women who were transitioning their gender and then regretting it.
So you went to the university and said, we want to include these people. What did the university then say to you?
They said, you need to resubmit your proposal to the ethics for ethical perusal.
And when you did that?
And then they said, no, you may not do it.
And the reason?
The fundamental reason given was that it might cause criticism of the research on social media, and criticism of the research would be criticism of the university, and they also added it is better not to offend people.
What do you think of that?
I was astonished at that decision. I think that a university exists to encourage discussion, research, dissent even, challenging perhaps ideas that are out of date or not particularly useful.
Is it true that they sent you a document that includes the phrase, engaging in a potentially politically incorrect piece of research carries a risk to the university?
They did write that, yes.
That seems an extraordinary thing for a university to write.
That's what I thought.
What are you going to do now?
Well, I did actually take legal advice, and my barrister asked for a stay of time for judicial review. I started a page on crowd justice, raising money to pay my legal fees, which was fairly successful. And I'm currently waiting for the university to conclude their own internal investigation in their complaints procedure.
Well, James Caspian, thanks. And we, of course, talked to the university. They said they couldn't comment until that investigation procedure was over.